Hi, it's Paul Clegg here, speaking from Somerset in the UK, and I've got my good friend Bob Nicoll, who is over in Las Vegas. Bob, I haven't spoken to you for a while, but tonight we're going to talk, it's your daytime, I want to talk about Remember the Ice, the whole principle behind it, because ever since you taught me these concepts, I see it everywhere. Big mistakes people are making. So I wonder whether you'd tell me, first of all, remind me about how you came across Remember the Ice.
Sure, Paul. It's a pleasure to be talking with you. It seems just a few weeks ago that I was over in Somerset in your area with you, and we were doing some BNI meetings and going to different functions, and it was great. That was just a couple years ago. Remember the Ice is a very simple story about reshaping or reframing your language. So here it is in a nutshell. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, across the street from a convenience store. I had noticed a sign that was in that store for quite a while. Here's the verbiage of that sign. When I walked in and asked Rick, the manager of the store, specifically it was Tuesday, July the 23rd, 1991. It was 10:07 in the morning. It was a very warm Tuesday. And I asked him a question about that. I said, Rick, how are your ice sales? And he said they're terrible. Now, Paul, Phoenix, Arizona in July, it's a bit warm, 110 in the shade in the morning. And I'm thinking, there's a disconnect here. So I asked him for a piece of paper and a magic marker, and I created a new sign. And so I actually made two of them, one for each cash register, and we put them up. Now, I changed the subject a little bit on, by design and chatted with him for a couple of moments and then left. When I came back about a month later, he saw me coming across the street, banged on the window, pointed to me, motioned for me to come over to him. So I met him outside the store in front of the ice box where the bags of ice were kept. He looked at me and he said, "What in the world did you do? I am selling ice like crazy." I said, "Well, Rick, let me explain it this way. If I say to you right now, don't think of the color blue, what color did you just think of?" And of course he said blue. And I said, when your customers used to look at a sign that said, "Don't forget the ice," what were you telling them to forget? Paul was classic. He paused, did one of these, the V8 moment, and said, "Oh my gosh, I was telling them to forget the ice." I said, "That's right." I said, "What's been happening since we put up this new sign?" And he said, "It's incredible." Now, here's the most important part of the entire story. During that period of time, after I made that initial change on July the 23rd, and here I was 4 or 5 weeks later coming back, he said, "Bob, I never told my employees about the sign. I never told any of my customers about the sign. It was just there." And I said, "That's perfect." Because what people would do is come into the store, look up, they're purchasing their items. No one ever said anything about ice. All of a sudden they looked up, saw this sign, and said, "Oh, can I get a couple of bags of ice on the way out the door?" It changed the paradigm of ice sales dramatically. His sales shot up 500% in 30 days.
Wow.
Now, for me, it was much more than just selling ice. But I asked myself a very important question. What if I got rid of the word "don't"? Wait a minute. What if I got rid of the word "can't"? How about "won't"? How about "wouldn't," "couldn't," "not," "shouldn't"? What if I just got rid of them? And the other thing that I did was I asked myself this question. And this is such a simple question, yet it's the main tenet of what Remember the Ice is all about. Because when you answer the question, you get an answer of how to make this shift. And the question was, I wonder what he would like his customers to do. Well, does he want them to forget the ice, or does he want them to remember the ice? So the answer to the question of I wonder what he wants them to do turned out to be, tell me what you'd like me to do. Hence, you want to remember the ice. Mm-hmm. And that's it in a nutshell. Now, from that, this entire, concept of reframing language, understanding naughty words, looking for the identifying what I call the critical 6 sales killing mistakes that people are using in sales, and also they cripple customer service. There's just so many different things to go. But that's the overview of Remember the Ice. It's that simple story of changing the sign.
I must admit, ever since you taught me that, and it jumps out at me now. I see it everywhere. In actual fact, I've been collecting examples of where people are meaning one thing. I know what they mean, but they're telling me to do something else, and it jumps out once you know. I've got examples from Tesco's, the major store over here, making this fundamental mistake, and I feel like getting onto their copywriters, their advertising people, and sharing what you're doing. Now, you've told me over the years many different examples. I mean, one of them was and I can never remember the statistics, but it was about don't run red, which is I know it's an Americanism, but it's really just don't go through the red stop sign. Do you want to explain a bit that?
Yes. I use this, here it is. Here's the verbiage. And this was, here it is, very simply. The verbiage that was on a billboard, a very large billboard in Phoenix, Arizona, at a very busy intersection where there's a north-south street, an east-west street, and also a street that came in at a 45-degree angle. So here's a very busy thoroughfare. I mean, this intersection is really active. I'm sitting on the east-west road, and I look up, and lo and behold, I see this message on a billboard. I do a little bit of investigating, and I find out that in Phoenix, Arizona, at that intersection, heading east, there are 3 to 4 times more accidents going that direction than coming the other way. And why? Because the billboard says, run red. Wait a minute. I thought it said, don't run red. But if I say to you, don't think of the color blue, what color would you think of, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
blue.
Well, if I say don't run red, which color are you going to run?
Going to run red.
I mean, here it is right here. It's do run red. It's such a simple concept. Most people, quite frankly, are unaware of it. When they hear the story, it literally opens up a whole new way of looking at things, in my opinion.
It's subliminal, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's why we don't even notice it when we write these things down or we say things to people. That's a great example.
It's so much a part of our landscape that in the process of re-education, or in the process of education, which is a 4-step process, the last step is personality trait formation. And when you think about it, when a behavior or a behavioral pattern becomes a part of your personality, you forget, or you have challenges remembering, well, when was I without this? When did I specifically start? Mm-hmm. When it comes to the use of language, we've been using language ever since we've been born. And there was even language. We even began to hear things even when we're in the womb. So we've been trained in the landscape of language since birth. So it's challenging to think about when we were without it.
Yeah.
The good news is, Paul, real quick, we can do something about it. And that's what Remember the Ice is.
I think that once people, I've certainly found that once I've become aware of these examples, I will use them, especially when I'm writing, but I'll immediately correct myself. I'm always very measured in what I say. I've been in sales and marketing for a long time, and I know the power of words to influence or to give an impression. But I also now know the power of those words that I think are innocent to actually get me the opposite result to the one that I want. And I very often think, be careful what you ask for, because you're going to get it.
Yes. I mean, if you think about it, a computer can only give you the information that you program it to give you. Mm-hmm. Computer is set up with a very simple system. It's called binary code, which is 1 and 0. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. It's a series of ones and zeros. Now, that sounds pretty simple. Now, you talk to a computer programmer, and believe me, the folks that get into really sophisticated programming, those little ones and zeros better be in the proper sequence or have the proper syntax. If they are missing that, you've got a bad program. Your program is going to fail. It's going to crash. So with that in mind, the simplicity, the one thing I'm encouraging people to think about is, this is the international, the red circle with the line is the international symbol for no. So in this case, I'm saying, look, no knots, no naughty words. Now, naughty is spelled K-N-O-T-T-Y, just to clarify, because it ties you up in a knot.
When you first said it, by the way, Bob, I thought you meant naughty.
I know. I know most people do, and that's why I do clarify because it's so simple when you stop and think about it, and just even the phrase "stop and think." I love this cartoon. This is from the New Yorker magazine. Sam Gross is the cartoonist, and I love his example here. Now, in his quote, it does have a naughty word in it. The word doesn't. And what it says at the bottom of it sort of makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Well, what I did was I just reframed it a little bit to say it makes you stop and think. The point is, if the listeners, the viewers of this video will stop and think about the message they want to convey, that it only takes a moment. You can share a better message. Now, just before we started recording this, you showed me an example of from one of the grocery store, one of the the markets over there.
In fact, it's that one. It's Tesco's.
Yeah, there it is, and it says, you won't lose out on big brands, fresh food, your own label. Really. So what that tells me is that as someone who looks at words, looks at the juxtaposition, the syntax, the combination of them, I immediately look at that and say, gosh, if I shop there, I'm going to lose out on big brands.
That is actually the way I feel, and it's on big hoardings as well.
Yeah.
Bob, you mentioned about reframing 5. Do you want to give us an example of what that's about?
Sure.
Because I can't remember.
Okay. So you're saying you're still you want to recall?
Yes.
Okay.
You're right. Very good. Yes.
Okay.
You must be terrible to have an evening with.
Well, here's the thing. Paul. And I must say, first of all, since we met, it's 4 years this summer, and I came over there and I had my wonderful trip around Europe and shared the message of Remember the Ice and out there in the Frome area in Somerset. It was a great experience, and I can say this, that I know that you have done a lot of work with this. The thing is that nobody's perfect, even myself. I still slip. It's just very, very, very rare. I've probably done it in 22 years, in that maybe I've slipped maybe a dozen times publicly. Mm-hmm. The point is, I spend a lot of time working on it. Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours in the book The Outliers. Well, I've calculated it. Since I've been working on this, I'm probably up to about 190,000 hours of work and practice on it because I do it 24/7. Mm-hmm. Now, when I first created the concept, I said, wait a minute, it's more than just don't. It's other words that have the word not in them or the contraction of N''T. And what I did was I came up with the original list called Not and the Hit List 6. And they just roll off the tongue. Not, don't, can't, won't, wouldn't, couldn't, shouldn't. Now, for those who are interested in the complete list, they can go to remembertheice.com on the naughty word page, and there's 28 that have been identified. We're going to focus on these main Not in the Hit List 6. Because what happens with them, if you think of it this way, if you eliminate the word not and get rid of the word shouldn't, you're left with do not, cannot, will not, would not, could not, because you take the contracted word and spread it out. Well, wait a minute. If I look at those words and get rid of the not, look what I'm left with. The reframing 5. Those are probably the 5 most powerful words in any language. Think about it. Think about how much more powerful that is. In the simple example of encouraging a patron to purchase ice, remember the ice it's indicative of the word do. And there's even a subtle, quiet, silent please. Please do get ice.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could have taken it to another level and said, back here in the States, back when the Great War was World War II, the war to end all wars. Okay, there were signs for recruiting of young men to come and join the service, and it was Uncle Sam in a caricature, and he had a finger pointing at said, I want you to join the army.
Mm.
And I could have used a sign like, I want you to buy ice. Well, that's sticking my finger right in their eye, almost that's a little bit forceful. The phrase "remember the ice" is what I call respectfully elegant. It's appropriate. It's a reminder to get someone. Chances are on a hot summer day, if you want to make iced tea or you wanted to to cool down your adult beverages or get some sodas or what have you. It's just a reminder. Hey, it's 100+ degrees, and you might want to remember to get some of that ice just to make it more comfortable for you.
What I found is that when I'm writing a blog or I'm writing a sales letter, and I find the word not or no slipping in, it jumps out at me. So I immediately say, what do I really want to happen? And I find that in the majority of cases, that happens when I'm speaking to people. And it's quite empowering. And I've also found, and this is a side issue, I'm getting a lot more clarity with my writing. I mean, I normally will not use a sentence when a chapter will do. I can write for Great Britain, but I'm finding that I'm getting shorter and clearer because I'm saying, and sometimes it's on a rewrite, but it's rephrasing, and it's rephrasing that. You once told me about, and I've just become a grandfather for the first time back in November, and I'm certainly very aware of the learning power of youngsters. You once told me, I think, about running with scissors and the sort of phrases we use. I've got a note here of "don't pull the cat's tail." Do you want to expand on that?
Sure. When we think about children are remarkable. They're precious. They're wonderful gifts. And they have the ability, they have an incredible ability to learn, and they're learning right from the beginning. And if you think about it, years ago, Walter Cronkite he was a famous, news broadcaster for CBS television here in the States.
Yeah, know him.
Many of us here in the States grew up, and would start our evening with his sign-off. That's the evening news of Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night. And he used to give a broadcast in the fall talking about the concern at the time. This was back in the 60s. The concern at the time about how much violence was on television. And I remember him saying, that the California PTA or other PTAs around the country, they were concerned about that by the time a child reaches the age of 8 or 9, they're going to see so many thousand hours of violent acts on television. And I've thought about that in relation to the experience that a child has by the time they reach that same age. Yes, I'm concerned of the amount of violence on television. Make that very clear. I am concerned about that. What I'm more concerned about is the number of times that a child hears naughty language in the form of demands or expectations on them. Well, you should know better. Don't touch the hot stove. You can't do that. You shouldn't have done that. Why aren't you doing a better job in school? What is the matter? I mean, it's like verbal vomit of just trash and garbage that's being dumped on these precious human beings. That I'm passionate about that. So don't pull the cat's tail. I mean, let me back up a little bit. If you say to a child, any of us who've ever been a parent, if we say to our child, don't touch that, what do they do?
You touch it.
What do they usually do? They usually touch it. And the next question is, and how quickly do they usually touch it? Pretty much right away.
Even adults do that, by the way, Bob. When you see a sign when you see a sign that says wet paint, don't touch.
Yeah, it's like an invitation to put your palm print on there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the thing, whether it's don't pull the cat's tail, don't cut in line, don't, poke your sister with a pencil, don't kick your brother in the shin, makes no difference what it is. You're inviting the opposite behavior when you use a phrase that is don't pull the cat's tail. Mm-hmm. Trust me. If we say to a child, don't pull the cat's tail, and there's a cat nearby, a couple of things are going to happen. They're going to hear that, and what they hear is, do pull the cat's tail. Mm-hmm. They'll pull it, and then the cat will give them some feedback.
Yeah.
Right?
There's another example that is very commonplace, and I see it so often on emails, and I've actually been saving a lot of these where we sign off an email asking people to what we think is to do something. And do you want to explain that?
Sure. Yeah, they're doing the opposite. This really came to light. I've been focusing on this for quite a while. During my trip in 2009 over in Europe, I was in Nicoll, Belgium, and Erwin Delata, delightful gentleman, who was the host of the event that night. At the end, I encourage people to pay attention to their emails and specifically how they sign off. And many people will say, "Well, don't hesitate to give me a call." And that's the very common phrase. Don't hesitate to reach out and contact me, or don't hesitate to give me a call. And so we finished the presentation. It was a very nice audience, and Erwin came up and he said, "Bob, I just want to tell you, thank you for sharing your message tonight. I think a lot of us got something very positive out of it, and I know one thing. I know one person is going to go home tonight and change the phrase on his email." I said, "Well, who's that?" He said, "It's me." Because it says right on my email, I'm your computer software specialist, and if you need some help, don't hesitate to give me a call. And he signs up. And I asked him there in front of the audience, I said, "Well, how's that been working out for you?" And he said, pretty bad. I said, "Well, how many calls do you get?" "How about none? Or maybe one or two." And I said, "Okay." Now, the beautiful thing about my trip was 2 weeks later, I was back in Belgium, teaming up with some other folks. We were heading on to a couple other countries, but I got a chance to meet with Erwin at the train station in Mechelen. And he had made that change that night. And when I touched base with him 2 weeks later, he said, "Bob," he said, "you would be amazed at the response that's happened because of what I changed on my email." I said, "Well, what did you change it to?" And he said, "Well, it was really pretty simple. I just said, if you'd like more information, please give me a call." And I said, "Well, how's that working?" He said, "I've already had like 10 calls." There you go.
Yeah.
Tell me what you'd like me to do. And it's so, especially with children. Children understand language very, very well. And, just like just in the very beginning when I shared with Rick, I said, "Rick, your message," when I asked him, I said, "Rick, don't think of the color blue. What color did you just think of?" Now, he thought of blue. And sometimes I'll ask people, "What color did you just think of?" And they say, "Well, I thought of purple." I said, "No, you thought of blue first. You said purple." The point is, you respond to what you hear and are stimulated with immediately. That's how it works.
I think I contributed to this next one, and I actually pull people up on it in a nice way, where people are. I'll say thank you for some good service. It could be in a restaurant, it could be in a supermarket store, and I say thank you for whatever. And I hear it so often. People say no problem, and instead of just normally I used to walk away from it, and nowadays I say, would you mind if I gave you some? Would you mind if I said something to you that really would make a big difference? And they often will say yes, and I explain that, I never thought I had a problem until you brought it up.
That's right. Exactly, Paul. And we've been talking about this, ever since we've been friends, 4 or 5 years. And you're absolutely right on the mark here. This 2-word phrase, no problem, creates so many unnecessary, extemporaneous, tangential issues in a conversation, specifically in sales and in customer service. And I do the same thing you did. I will call people on it, and I will say, gosh, I was pretty excited about this transaction until you said there's no problem. Now my question is, what's the problem? What is it? I mean, did I miss something? Was something lost in translation? What happened? Now I'm concerned about what's going on. And in some cases, some people, without really being aware, it might stop them from even completing a transaction. It is such a simple thing.
Well, depending on the size of the transaction, we can be very nervous about buyer's remorse, and maybe we're giving people that lead in to this buyer's remorse, where it's so much easier to get into the habit of saying it's my pleasure, because that actually, rather than being a dismissive remark, it's my pleasure actually is a pleasurable remark. It gives you a nice feeling to receive.
Absolutely. And here's the other interesting aspect of this phrase, no problem, Paul. And this is something I've been working on. I mentioned earlier, I'm developing this little Remember the Ice report on the 6 sales killing mistakes that people use to mess up getting the results they want. I mean, if you think about it, communication's at the core of every personal moment, experience, transaction, and interaction. And we are either cultivating and nurturing sales, or we're cutting them off at the kneecaps. And no problem is like a machete going through the knees. It is a horrific statement to use. Horrific's kind of maybe it's a rough word. In this example, I'm going to call it that. So it's a very, very poor choice of a phrase to use with someone. My pleasure is so much better.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. As the person who is hearing the no problem, that is a dismissive phrase. Think about this, that the person who is saying no problem, unbeknownst to them, is negating their own value at the same time.
Absolutely. Very good point, that, Bob.
It's so powerful. Negating your own value and negating the value of the person you're working with, your valued customer. Look, if you're in business, whether you're selling left-handed widgets to right-handed people or you're selling multi-billion-dollar contracts, it makes no difference what the product or service is. What does make a difference is how do you communicate about that product or service, and how do you communicate with the other individual involved. That's what counts.
Well, I have to say, coming with a great deal of experience in sales, the sort of 6 killer statements of sales maybe could be the subject of a follow-up call. But I would like to end tonight's call with something I can't remember you ever mentioning to me, and then that's about the community project. I mean,
so you're saying this is a new subject for you?
Yes. It's an age thing, you see. But I'm glad you've done it. I'm glad you've done it.
No, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to share this with you. The community project, the community project is something that I created as a result of, I want to show you, this is what stimulated the community project. A dear friend of mine in Anchorage, Alaska, a young gentleman who's my graphic designer, one of my graphic designers, and helped me with my logo and on my website, etc. He sent me a text message with this picture in it.
Don't play with guns, yeah.
This is a cartoon. This is a coloring book that is distributed on one of the largest, it is the largest military base in Alaska. It's Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. It's its own community. I mean, I think there's 40,000 people that live out there on the base. It's huge. That coloring book is distributed to all of the youngsters who are who are part of the families on that base. And when I saw that picture come across my phone in a text, I snapped. I just said, okay, enough's enough. We've got to make some shifts and some changes. Now, a little sidebar. I spent probably 6-7 hours attempting to track down who created the coloring book because I wanted to offer my services to assist in helping them with the word choice. Okay? Because it desperately needed it. In the process, I also ended up talking to the head of marketing for the National Rifle Association. Mm-hmm. One of the things in their marketing pieces was, if you see a firearm, there's a youngster, it's a safety program. Now, this is their safety program, okay? Mm-hmm. And you know what it says in their safety program? Do not touch or pick up the firearm. Really? Really? Mm-hmm. Do not touch that. Well, okay. So we could spend another call on just that. So the community project was born when I saw that, and I said to myself, wait a minute. I remember back in the early 70s, there was a movie came out, Norman Lear, the well-known producer and director, All in the Family is one of his shows. He created a spoof, this movie called Cold Turkey. Mm-hmm. Cold Turkey was a movie about a little town in Iowa that was a little rundown, little stop along a dusty trail, if you will. And the idea was that this tobacco tycoon would offer any community $25 million if the entire community, the people who smoke, could stop for 30 days and go cold turkey. Well, I remember seeing that movie. It's a funny movie. There's people like Dick Van Dyke, Maureen Stapleton, Bob Newhart are characters are actors who played in it. But just the concept of going cold turkey, I thought to myself, wait a minute. What if we got an entire community to go cold turkey on naughty words? What if we absolutely eradicated them throughout written material, and helping people, craft better messages in both their written messages as well as their spoken messages? What if the entire community did that? What would the impact of that be? Imagine the impact in the schools. Imagine how many coloring books that would say, instead of don't play with guns, to stay away from guns. Or use guns with a responsible person, or what? People who as soon as I said that, I just had this image of several people in several states over here going, "Oh my gosh, I got to have access to my guns." Whatever the case, the point is just handle them safely. Okay, handle them safely. Is it really good idea for a 6-7-year-old to be playing with a gun? I say no. Okay, that's my point of view on that. Bottom line is, the messages that people use in the schools, in businesses, just the signs along the road. I mean, think about this. In America, we have signs along the highway when the line is a double line in the middle of the road. There's usually means that's a no passing zone. Mm-hmm. Now, no passing is appropriate. The word no is appropriate. I wanted to come back to that because earlier on we were talking about, when you're writing a blog or making, doing things, if you use the word not or no, not's the one you want to stay away from. No is extremely appropriate. It's a very appropriate word. Mm-hmm. And in this case, in this example, no passing zone is appropriate language. If you see a sign that says do not pass, that's where people get tickets because they do what the sign says. The sign says do pass. Okay? Do not pass is no different than do not think of blue or do not forget the ice or do not run red.
It certainly is. I caught on to a lot of it fairly quickly because I was around you. We were talking about it. When people hear it for the first time, and when I've shared this information, there's quite a bit of interest and excitement. Where can people get further information at this stage? Because I know you've got a new book coming out.
I will, yeah. The first book is Remember the Ice and Other Paradigm Shifts. That was released back in 2009, and actually 2008. And that's available as well as the second book, Exceptional Care for Your Valued Client, which is actually going to have a new title in its second printing, and that title is going to be Why Does Customer Service Suck? So we're jumping right into the fray with that one. these books and the other programs and things that I offer are available very simply on the website, www.remembertheice.com. I am available. I can be reached on Skype. If you go to that website, you'll find me. If you Google the name Bob Nicoll, Nicoll, there's actually two pretty popular Bob Nickolls. I'm grateful to be one of them on the internet. I come up pretty much right near the top with Remember the Ice, and you'll find me. I encourage you to. I'd be happy to work with you. There's many ways that I can do work with you on Skype, just like we're doing this call. I'm in Las Vegas. Paul's in England.
Well, what I'd certainly like to do, I'd like to maybe follow this call up. We'll see what sort of response I want to. For some time now, I've wanted to share this knowledge because I don't hear it from anywhere else. I hear a lot of people that are into linguistics and language, etc. I know, being in marketing, I know a lot of copywriters, but I'd never come across this before, sadly. So I really want to get it out and to see whether, even if only half of it sticks, the difference that makes. So I certainly have enjoyed tonight's call. I'd like to follow that up if it's okay, and maybe offline we can talk about maybe another subject if we've certainly got the interest from viewers. So Bob,
sounds great.
What time is it with you?
Right now, it is coming up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on St. Patrick's Day, Sunday here.
Well, we've had a good St. Patrick's. The Irish didn't have a particularly good game against Italy yesterday, but they scored more points than England did. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Bob, and
sure.
Thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.